we slip quietly into the freezing embrace of a Viking winter, a time where survival was more than just getting by. It was about battling the harshest elements imaginable. You're standing there in the middle of a snow-drenched landscape with frost clinging to your face and a biting wind that feels like it's cutting through to your very bones. It's minus 30 degrees Celsius and the cold is everywhere. It doesn't matter if you're inside a longhouse or out in the open, the Vikings knew this cold all too well. And the best part, you probably won't survive this without a little bit of help from your fellow survivors. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is. I'm curious to know who's joining me for tonight's journey. Now dim the lights and let's settle in. The year is around 900 AD and you're standing inside one of the longhouses of a Viking settlement. It's dark outside with only the faintest glow of the moon sneaking through the cracks in the wooden structure. The night feels endless with the air so cold it seems to freeze your breath before it even escapes your lips. You can hear the wind howling through the trees, rattling the walls of the longhouse. Inside, the warmth is barely enough to take the chill off your bones. But here's the thing. This place, this longhouse, is your refuge. It's a sturdy building made from logs and turf designed to keep the freezing temperatures at bay, or at least to fight them off for a while. The structure is built with slanted roofs, thick walls, and little to no insulation, but somehow it offers you a sliver of comfort amid the relentless cold. It's hard to imagine that these ancient people managed to survive in such an unforgiving climate, but they did. Historians still argue whether the Vikings' abilities to survive in such harsh conditions was purely down to their resourcefulness, or if it was more about the designs of their homes and clothing. In fact, their longhouses were more than just shelters. They were a reflection of their way of life. Every piece of wood, every beam, and every thatched roof helped them weather the brutality of the north. Yet, no matter how well these longhouses were constructed, the cold outside would always be just a breath away. You feel the chill crawl deeper as the fire in the hearth crackles in front of you. Its warmth is only a fleeting comfort, but it's enough to keep you from shivering uncontrollably. And that fire, it's the heart of this entire place. Without it, everything would collapse. But no matter how hard it burns, there's always more cold. You glance around and notice the others gathered around the fire, huddled close for warmth. There are no luxuries here, just the struggle to survive each day. The temperature outside continues to drop as the night presses on. With each gust of wind, the wooden walls groan in protest. It's hard to ignore the fact that the cold has the power to break down even the strongest walls. Yet here inside, with the warmth of the fire, you feel a strange sense of comfort. In this moment, the cold seems almost manageable as long as you stay close to the fire and the people around you. But the question lingers, how did they do it? How did the Vikings, with their simple tools and minimal resources, survive these freezing winters year after year? The answer, you quickly realize, isn't just in the architecture or the fire. It's in their clothing, their food, and their way of thinking about survival. Historians still debate the role of the Viking community in this survival. Was it the sheer toughness of the people, their mental fortitude and adaptability that helped them thrive despite the overwhelming cold? Or was it the material culture they relied on, their clothing tools and fire-making techniques, that enabled them to endure these harsh conditions? Either way, it's clear that the Vikings were masters at dealing with the cold, and every part of their environment was designed with survival in mind. For now, though, you watch the fire flicker and dance the warmth, offering only a brief respite. Tomorrow the cold will be waiting for you again, but that's the Viking way, isn't it? Every day is a battle and you are ready to face it. The longhouse stands as your sanctuary against the wilderness outside, and as you settle deeper into the warmth of its walls, you start to realize how crucial this structure is to your survival. You look up at the ceiling where the beams hold the roof above, thick with smoke stains from countless fires that have burned over the years. The walls are rough-hewn, the timber dark and weathered from the centuries of wind, rain and snow. The longhouse, built with skill and precision, is a testament to Viking ingenuity in the face of unrelenting conditions. You might think it's just a building, but this longhouse is everything. It's your shield, your home, and your lifeline to survival. Imagine the craftsmanship it took to assemble the logs and turf to create a structure that could resist the coldest of winds. The walls aren't sealed tight and the roof isn't perfect, but they are enough to give you shelter. The inside, while far from luxurious, offers warmth. Not in the way you'd expect from a modern home, but in a way that feels grounded, real. You can smell the earthy scent of the turf, feel the wood beneath your fingertips, and hear the creaking of the beams echoing the resilience of those who built it. The longhouse is one large open space. The centre of the room is dominated by a large hearth where a fire crackles its warmth spreading out to the edges of the room. This hearth is essential as the fire is your primary source of heat. Without it, the longhouse would be just as cold as the outside world. The hearth is surrounded by benches where families sleep close to one another, sharing warmth. But despite the fire, the cold still sneaks in. The wind outside is relentless, pressing against the walls as if it were trying to seep inside. You might think the hearth is enough to keep you warm, but the truth is it's not. Vikings were no strangers to the bitter chill that gnawed at their bones. The fire burns bright in the centre of the room, but the heat can only reach so far. The edge of the longhouse are cold and the walls don't insulate like modern homes. Historians still argue whether the longhouses were designed to be temporary shelters for the long winter, or if they were built to withstand the brutal climate year-round. Some argue that these homes were more about survival and comfort, emphasizing their practicality over warmth. Whatever the case, the fact remains that the longhouse offered the Vikings a place to survive even in the harshest winters. Now, as you settle into the shadows cast by the firelight, you notice the low hum of conversation filling the air. The longhouse is alive with the sound of families discussing the day's events, sharing stories and making plans. This is where Viking culture thrives inside the walls of these communal spaces. The family unit is close-knit, not just for emotional support but for survival. The more bodies gathered around the hearth, the more warmth they can share. The fire might be small, but the warmth it offers is multiplied by the presence of those around you. The longhouse isn't just about surviving the cold, though. It's about community. The hearth at the centre is the heart of Viking life. Historians debate whether this communal living, so tightly packed together for warmth, was what solidified the Viking sense of identity. Could the survival of the Vikings, with all their valour and strength, have been forged inside these longhouses where they lived in constant closeness? Did the cold draw them together in ways that created stronger familial bonds, stronger alliances, and a deeper sense of belonging? The answer perhaps is yes. There's something about the shared struggle that brings people closer, something about the collective experience of surviving a winter night together that strengthens the Viking spirit. As the night deepens, you feel the warmth from the hearth begin to fade. The fire still flickers, but it will burn down soon, leaving you to huddle together for warmth. You hear the wind howling outside, pressing against the walls of the longhouse, but inside there is a sense of calm, a sense of unity. It's a strange thing to feel so much warmth inside despite the freezing cold outside. And yet here you are, surrounded by those you trust, keeping each other alive one night at a time. Tomorrow the cold will return, but for now you rest easy in the knowledge that you're not facing it alone. You can hear the wind howling outside, a constant cold reminder of the world beyond the longhouse. Inside it feels like a small bubble of warmth and safety, yet the elements are never far away. Each gust of wind outside makes the walls of the longhouse groan and creak, as if the very building is responding to the pressure of the storm. You turn your head, glancing at the door, which isn't quite sealed properly. The cracks let in the faintest draught, a chilling whisper of the cold world just beyond. Still it's manageable, and the fire at the hearth continues to flicker, casting a soft glow around the room. The Viking winter is relentless, and as you pull your furs tighter around your body, you realize just how much the environment shapes every aspect of your life here. The cold is an ever-present companion, one that you have to live with respect and learn to survive. It's not just the air, but the frozen landscape that stretches out beyond the walls of the longhouse. The ground outside is covered in a thick layer of snow, and the trees are bare, their skeletal branches swaying in the harsh wind. It's a landscape that seems to push you back, a reminder that this land doesn't welcome the unprepared. You step outside feeling the bite of the cold immediately. Your breath turns to mist in the air, and each step you take crunches in the snow beneath your boots. The cold seeps through your clothing, and the sharpness of the air makes your skin feel raw. You know that if you stay out too long, frostbite could set in, and with no immediate relief from the cold, it could become life-threatening. For the Vikings, this was a daily reality, one that shaped their entire way of life. They were experts at navigating the cold, knowing when to push forward and when to huddle together for warmth. Historians still argue whether the Vikings' ability to survive these harsh winters was due to their adaptability or the skills they learned over generations. One of the most notable survival tactics they had was their clothing. The Viking wardrobe was crafted with an understanding of insulation and weatherproofing. You feel the weight of your layered woolen tunic, the fur-lined cloak draped around your shoulders, and the thick leather boots that keep the snow from seeping in. The Vikings didn't have the luxury of modern fabrics, but what they did have was ingenuity and a deep connection to the animals around them. Animal hides and furs, as well as woven wool, provided much-needed insulation. These materials were often layered in such a way that air was trapped between the layers, creating natural barriers against the cold. The fire inside the longhouse still crackles in the distance, its warmth. Now a comforting presence you can rely on. It's hard to imagine living without it, as the cold seems to permeate everything in this world. But the Vikings didn't just survive, they thrived. They understood how to manipulate their environment using what little they had to their advantage. You think about the way they crafted their homes, the way they built their clothing, and how they made use of every resource available to them, from wood to animal skins, even the food they ate. Your stomach growls, reminding you that survival also means providing sustenance during these long dark months. The Vikings didn't just live off what they could hunt during the winter months, but also off what they could preserve. They knew that preserving meat and vegetables for the long winter months was essential. Salted meats, dried fish and root vegetables were stored carefully, often packed away in cool, dark places to last through the cold season. The food was simple yet effective. You can almost taste the preserved meats, the saltiness that makes every bite feel like a small triumph. The fire in the hearth flickers again, drawing your attention. You stare at the dancing flames, thinking of how the hearth was more than just a source of warmth. It was a social gathering point. This was where the Vikings gathered after long days in the cold, where stories were told and meals were shared. Despite the harshness of the winter, the hearth was a place of comfort. Historians still argue whether the communal aspect of the longhouse was what made it a successful survival strategy. Was it the warmth of the fire that kept the Viking spirit alive, or was it the sense of shared experience, the camaraderie that was built around the fire? Whatever the answer, the hearth was central to everything the Vikings did, a beacon of warmth in a frozen world. As you sit by the fire now, you understand why the Vikings held such strong beliefs in their gods. These dark, cold winters with their fierce winds and bitter cold were reminders of the power and unpredictability of nature. It's no surprise that the gods were seen as forces of nature themselves, their temperaments as wild and untamable as the very elements the Vikings had to contend with. To the Vikings, the winter was not just a challenge of survival, but a test of their faith, their resilience, and their ability to adapt. And as the fire burns low and you feel the cold creeping in again, you realize that the Vikings, despite their struggle against the elements, were masters of surviving in a world that demanded strength, patience, and ingenuity. You sit by the fire, the warmth beginning to fade as the night stretches on. The flames flicker and dance in the hearth, casting long shadows across the longhouse. The crackling wood is the only sound that breaks the otherwise still quiet air. It's hard to believe that outside the world is covered in a thick blanket of snow, with the cold biting at everything it touches. You pull your fur-lined cloak tighter around your shoulders, hoping for a little more warmth. It's not enough to fight the chill completely, but it helps. The Vikings didn't have the comfort of modern heating systems, of course, but they knew how to make do. Their clothing, crafted from the fur of animals they hunted, was an essential part of surviving the freezing temperatures. You run your fingers over the thick wool of your tunic, noticing the warmth that it provides. The layers of wool, fur and leather protect you from the wind and snow, but it's the fur-lined boots that truly make the difference. The boots, made from thick animal hide, are designed to keep the cold from creeping up your legs, offering some relief from the freezing air. Historians still argue whether the Vikings' clothing was as effective as we believe it was. Some argue that the materials they used, like animal hides and wool, were the perfect insulation for their environment. Others claim that while it helped, it still wasn't enough to keep the extreme cold at bay. The fact is, the Vikings did what they could with what they had, but their survival came down to more than just the clothes on their backs. The fire is fading now, but you know that the Longhouse is a shared space where everyone works together to stay warm. You notice the people around you gathered in small groups, their bodies close together to share warmth. This communal living is as much a survival strategy as anything else. The people here are not just your family, they are your lifeline. Without them, this harsh environment would be unbearable. The Vikings' way of life was built on this concept of communal living. Inside the Longhouse, there was no room for personal space. Everyone was packed together, sharing everything from food to warmth. And while this might seem uncomfortable by today's standards for the Vikings, it was a necessity. Scholars still debate whether this close-knit way of living was the key to their success in surviving harsh winters, or if their toughness and resilience played a larger role. Either way, the Longhouse wasn't just a place to sleep, it was a place to stay alive. And then there's the food. You can't survive the Viking winter without enough to eat, and the Vikings were masters at preserving their food. You can almost taste the salted fish, dried meats and root vegetables that were stored in cool, dark places to last through the long winter months. While these foods might seem simple and unappealing to us today, they were lifelines in an environment where fresh food was hard to come by. The preservation methods the Vikings used were designed to keep the food safe and edible even after months of freezing temperatures. Historians agree that the ability to store and preserve food was crucial to the Vikings' survival, but some argue that it wasn't just about what they ate, but how they ate. You glance around the Longhouse, watching the fire flicker as the people settle into their sleeping arrangements. The benches are crowded, but there's a sense of warmth despite the lack of space. The Vikings slept in close quarters, their bodies curled up together for warmth, sharing blankets and furs. In a way, this closeness helped them survive the cold. But what about the mental toll of spending months in such conditions? Historians often debate the psychological effects of Viking winter survival. Was the struggle to stay warm and fed a mental challenge as much as a physical one? Could the isolation and confinement of the Longhouse have affected the Vikings' minds in ways we can't fully understand? These are questions that remain unanswered. But what is clear is that the Vikings were able to endure the harsh winters through a combination of practical measures and sheer willpower. It's hard to imagine the resilience required to face down the cold night after night, but that's exactly what they did. The wind outside picks up again, howling through the cracks in the Longhouse. You pull your cloak tighter and settle in for the night. Tomorrow the cold will return, but for now, you're safe inside these walls, surrounded by the warmth of the fire and the people who keep you going. The Vikings didn't just survive the cold, they thrived because of their ability to adapt, to work together and to face the challenges head on. The wind outside grows stronger, and you can feel the Longhouse shake with every gust. You glance at the beams above you, wondering how they've held up over the years, how many winters they've seen. The walls creak and groan in protest as the storm presses against them, but the structure holds firm, providing a small sense of security. You try to push the cold out of your mind, but it lingers, an ever-present shadow at the edges of your thoughts. Despite the fire, the warmth is fleeting and the chill creeps in again, reminding you that survival here is never a certainty. You pull your fur-lined cloak tighter, hoping to trap some warmth within. The cloak, like all Viking clothing, is made from the pelts of animals they hunted and skinned. The fur on the inside is thick and insulating, offering some protection against the biting cold. Your leather boots, lined with fur, are sturdy built to handle the snowy terrain outside. They help you keep your footing as you move through the snow and ice, where a single misstep could lead to injury or worse. The Vikings knew that clothing was just as vital as shelter in their fight against the winter, and their survival depended on their ability to craft and wear functional, durable garments. Historians still argue over the exact materials used in Viking clothing and how effective they really were. Some suggest that the combination of animal hides and wool provided the perfect insulation, while others claim that it was never enough to keep out the extreme cold for long periods. One thing is certain: the Vikings were resourceful, using every part of the animals they hunted to create clothing that could stand up to the harsh winters. From the furs of bears and wolves to the hides of reindeer and elk, no part of the animal went to waste. Their clothes were designed not only to protect against the cold, but also to last through months of wear and tear. The fire in the hearth crackles again, offering a moment of relief from the biting cold. You close your eyes for a moment, listening to the gentle popping of the wood, feeling the warmth wash over you. Inside the longhouse, it's not just the heat from the fire that provides comfort. It's the shared experience, the knowledge that you're not alone in facing the cold. The people around you are your community, and together you face the challenges of the winter. You think about the close quarters in which you all sleep huddled together for warmth. It's uncomfortable, yes, but necessary. Historians still debate whether this communal living was a survival strategy or a cultural norm for the Vikings. Was it the physical closeness that helped them endure, or was it the social bonds they forged in these harsh conditions? Some argue that the Viking way of life, built on strong familial and social ties, played a huge role in their ability to survive. In a place where the cold could kill, it wasn't just the body that needed warmth, it was the spirit as well. Being close to others, sharing the burden of survival, made the struggle more bearable. There was strength in unity, and the longhouse provided the perfect setting for this communal living. The conversation around the fire slowly fades as people begin to drift off to sleep, their bodies curling up together under layers of furs. You settle into your own spot, pulling a thick blanket over you. The warmth from the fire lingers for a while, but it fades as the night grows colder. You know that the fire will die down, and soon you will be left in the cold, waiting for the next shift of warmth to come. But for now, you let your eyes close, feeling the collective warmth of the people around you. The cold never really leaves, but the fire, the clothing, and the shared presence of others are enough to keep it at bay. Tomorrow the battle against the winter will begin again, but tonight you rest. You rest knowing that you have the tools, the skills, and the community to face another day in the Viking winter. The world outside is frozen and inhospitable, but inside the longhouse you are safe. The night stretches on and the wind continues to howl outside, but the warmth from the fire keeps the longhouse alive with a quiet hum. You can hear the rhythmic breathing of those around you, each person drifting off into sleep, their bodies wrapped in layers of furs. The warmth is fleeting, but it's enough to ease you into rest. Your mind drifts between dreams and reality, and you feel the pulse of life inside the longhouse where everything, even the cold, is shared. You wake early the next morning before the sun even begins to rise, and the cold immediately makes itself known. The fires burn down to embers, and you can already feel the chill seeping into the room. You stretch out, feeling the stiffness in your muscles from a night spent curled up with others. The blanket over you is warm, but not enough to shield you from the cold air now filling the room. The scent of wood slew and the earthy aroma of the longhouse are the first things you inhale as you sit up the warmth of the fire, just a memory. It's time to tend to the fire again. The hearth has to be rekindled before the day begins, but getting the fire going in the early morning is no easy task. The embers are weak and the air is thick with frost. You gather the tinder and dry kindling, your hands numb as you try to get the flames going. It's a simple task, yet in the freezing cold it feels monumental. The Vikings knew that a warm fire was their lifeline, especially in the morning when the cold was at its worst. Starting a fire wasn't just about creating warmth, it was about survival. It was a daily ritual, one that required skill and patience. Historians still argue whether the Vikings had more sophisticated methods for starting fires than we give them credit for. Some suggest they had fire-making kits that could produce flames even in the harshest conditions, while others believe their methods were simple yet effective, using flint and steel to create sparks or rubbing sticks together to ignite a flame. What's clear is that fire was the centre of Viking life. They would do anything to keep it alive, especially during the bitter cold mornings. The act of kindling the fire became symbolic, an act of defiance against the winter, a statement that no matter how hard the cold tried to take over the Vikings would not let it win. As the flames grow stronger, you feel the warmth spreading through the room. It's slow at first, just a hint of comfort, but it gradually grows, filling the longhouse with a sense of relief. The cold doesn't disappear, but the fire makes it more manageable. This is what survival means in a Viking winter constant effort. There is no moment of respite, no break from the cold. You must always work to maintain the warmth to keep the fire alive, and to ensure that the longhouse remains a safe haven in a world that wants to freeze you out. It's not just the fire that sustains you, it's the food. The Vikings had to make sure they had enough to eat to survive the winter. Food wasn't just about filling your stomach, it was about endurance. You think about the salt-preserved meats hanging in the corners of the longhouse, the dried fish and the root vegetables that were stored to last throughout the cold months. Each meal was a careful balance, a strategy to ensure you had enough to survive until the thaw. The Vikings didn't have the luxury of refrigeration, so they had to be resourceful. They understood that food had to be preserved, dried, salted and stored carefully to last through the winter. And they had to do it without wasting anything. Nothing went to waste in a Viking home. Scholars still debate whether Viking food preservation techniques were as advanced as some other ancient cultures. Was their knowledge of drying, salting and fermenting food enough to ensure they could make it through the long months without fresh supplies? Some say the Vikings were experts at food preservation, while others claim they struggled more than we realize. One thing is certain, their survival depended on their ability to make the most of the resources they had, including their food. Without proper preservation techniques, the Vikings wouldn't have lasted through the long winters, and the longhouse wouldn't have been the sanctuary it was. You glance around at the people in the longhouse. Everyone is awake now, moving about and starting their day. The fire is fully rekindled and you can feel the warmth beginning to spread. It's time to start preparing for the challenges ahead, whether it's another day spent fighting the cold or working together to ensure there's enough food to last. The cold is never far away, but inside the longhouse you feel something else. You feel the strength of the Viking spirit, the drive to survive, and the knowledge that no matter how harsh the winter, you will face it together. As the sun begins to rise, casting pale light through the cracks of the longhouse, you feel the air still crisp, the fire burning steadily at the hearth. It's the moment you dread each morning, the shift from warmth to cold as the fire begins to lose its strength overnight. You pull yourself from your blankets, feeling the bite of the cold instantly. The others around you are stirring as well, wrapping themselves in their furs and trying to gather warmth from the last lingering embers. The first step of the day is always the same: rekindling the fire. The Viking approach to fire starting was anything but simple. They didn't just light a match or flick a switch like we do today. No, for them it was a skill honed over years of practice. The Vikings relied on flint and steel rocks that struck sparks when struck together, or they used the primitive technique of friction rubbing wood together to create heat. Historians still debate the methods the Vikings used most efficiently, some suggesting they had fire-starting kits sophisticated enough to last through the harshest winters, while others think it was a combination of basic tools and sheer perseverance that allowed them to survive. Either way, starting a fire was more than a routine. It was an art and a critical part of surviving the endless winter. Once the fire takes, you feel a wave of relief wash over you. Slowly warmth begins to radiate through the longhouse and the familiar comfort of the hearth spreads outward, chasing away the cold that had been creeping in during the night. The scent of burning wood fills the air, mixing with the earthy smells of the longhouse. It's an odd comfort, the scent of fire and the constant reminder that survival is a series of small victories. But even with the warmth of the fire, you can still feel the bite of winter at the edges of the room. You know that this battle will continue day after day. It's not just the cold you have to contend with, it's the other dangers that come with the winter months. The Vikings were skilled hunters and gatherers, but they also understood that the winter season posed unique threats, both physical and mental. Isolation limited food supplies, and the constant struggle to stay warm took their toll on the Vikings. Yet there's something about the way they survived that captivates modern scholars. Could it be the fierce community spirit they fostered? Or was it their deep connection to nature and the harsh landscape that helped them endure? Some argue that the Vikings' strength came from their physical resilience, their ability to endure hardship through sheer force of will. Others believe that their success in surviving the winters was rooted in their adaptability, their capacity to make use of every available resource. And then there's the ongoing debate among historians about the role of the environment itself. Was it the harshness of the winters that made the Vikings so tough, or was it their ability to work together in the face of adversity that gave them an edge over other cultures? As you stand by the fire, you can't help but think about the generations of Vikings who faced these same challenges year after year. The longhouse, though simple, was a centre of survival. It wasn't just the walls that protected you, it was the collective effort of everyone inside. The Vikings didn't survive alone. They survived because they were part of a community bound together by shared struggles and shared warmth. Their survival depended on their ability to work together, to use every skill and tool at their disposal to make it through another winter. You take a deep breath, feeling the warmth start to fill the space around you. The fire crackles its bright orange flames, licking at the air. The cold doesn't go away, but the fire makes it bearable. You know that each day in the Viking longhouse was a fight, but it was also a testament to resilience, to a people who knew how to endure even the most brutal conditions. They understood that survival wasn't just about fighting against the cold, it was about understanding it, respecting it, and using it to their advantage. As you gather around the fire, you realize that this space, this longhouse, is where life happens. The fire isn't just about warmth, it's about keeping spirits high, about forging bonds that will carry the Vikings through yet another challenging season. And as the warmth spreads through the room, you can't help but feel a quiet pride in the resilience of those who've come before you. The warmth from the fire continues to spread throughout the longhouse, but the cold outside is still very much alive, a constant presence that presses against the walls. You sit back, letting the fire's glow settle into your bones as you watch the others begin their tasks for the day. The sounds of footsteps on the cold floor and the soft murmur of conversation fill the air. There's a routine here, a rhythm that everyone follows, dictated by the harsh seasons and the ever-present need for survival. For the Viking, survival wasn't just about the physical environment, it was about adapting to it. This constant battle with the elements shaped their entire culture. Every movement, every decision was influenced by the need to stay warm to protect themselves from the harsh winters. Historians continue to debate whether Viking culture would have been as resilient and enduring if not for the brutal winters. Some believe the long, hard winters were the driving force behind Viking innovation and strength. Others argue that Viking resilience came from their seafaring and trading prowess, that the cold weather merely served as another obstacle to overcome, not the defining force behind their success. One thing that can't be disputed is the Vikings' use of what little they had. From their clothing to their homes, everything was built with a single purpose in mind: survival. The longhouse was designed to trap heat, but it wasn't just the physical space that kept the Vikings alive, it was the knowledge they had about how to use their environment to its fullest. The Vikings were masters at utilizing their natural resources, from animal hides to the wood that surrounded them. They knew how to make the most of what they could hunt, forage and gather, ensuring they had enough food to see them through the harshest months. And speaking of food, you feel your stomach rumble, reminding you that it's time to start preparing for the day's meals. The Vikings didn't have the luxury of fresh produce year-round, but they had their own ways of keeping food preserved throughout the winter. Salted meats, dried fish, and root vegetables were staples in the Viking diet. You can almost taste the saltiness of the dried fish, the sharpness of the preserved meat. It's not the most luxurious of meals, but it's enough to keep you going. Scholars continue to explore how Vikings preserved their food, whether it was through salting, drying, or smoking. Some believe that their methods were remarkably sophisticated for the time, while others suggest that they may have struggled more than we realize with food scarcity during particularly harsh winters. The fact remains that they were resourceful and found ways to stretch what little they had. For people living in such a harsh environment, the preservation of food wasn't just a skill, it was a lifeline. The communal nature of Viking life is also crucial in this equation. As you sit around the fire watching the others prepare for the day, you realize that it's not just the food or the warmth that keeps you going. It's the strength of the community, the shared burden of survival. Together you face the challenges of the day, supporting one another, sharing resources, and making sure no one is left behind. In a world where the cold can kill, the bonds between you and those around you are what ensure your survival. Historians still discuss whether the Vikings' close-knit communities were the secret to their enduring success. Was their survival a result of the sheer strength of their individual wills, or was it the social cohesion, the way they worked together, to make it through the long winter months? Some argue that their unity, the need to rely on each other for warmth, food, and survival played a major role in their abilities to thrive in such extreme conditions. Others suggest that the Vikings' individual strength and independence were the real keys to their survival. Regardless of the debate, what is clear is that they were a people who understood the importance of working together to overcome the challenges they faced. The fire crackles again, sending a fresh wave of warmth through the room. You take a deep breath, feeling the heat spread into your chest. Despite the cold outside, inside the longhouse, you're safe. It's a fleeting comfort, one that will last only as long as the fire burns. But for now, it's enough. You know that as long as the fire burns, as long as the community remains strong, you will continue to survive. As the day presses on, the longhouse seems to hum with activity. People move about, tending to their tasks, preparing for another long night against the cold. The fire crackles steadily in the hearth, its warmth filling the room with a sense of comfort that you take for granted until you step outside. You know that beyond the walls the world is still frozen. The snow lies thick and heavy, covering the land like a thick, unyielding blanket. The cold is unrelenting, an ever-present force that waits just outside, ready to take over at the first sign of weakness. You glance at the other Vikings as they go about their work. Their expressions are focused, determined. There is no room for hesitation in this world. The cold doesn't care about your plans or intentions, it simply demands that you survive, or it will take everything from you. There's an unspoken understanding between the people here. They know what they're up against, and they're ready to face it together. In the distance, you hear the sound of an axe chopping through wood. The Vikings are always preparing, whether it's chopping firewood for the hearth or gathering resources for the months ahead. They understand that the key to survival lies in constant preparation, in being ready for whatever the cold might bring. It's not enough to simply endure the winter. You have to fight it every day, constantly adapting and overcoming. Scholars still debate whether the Vikings' ability to prepare for the cold was their greatest strength. Was it their resourcefulness, or was it their unwavering determination that kept them alive in such extreme conditions? Some believe the Vikings were simply born survivors with an innate ability to endure hardship. Others suggest that it was their careful planning, their ability to think ahead and prepare for the worst that allowed them to thrive in such a harsh environment. Regardless of the reason, what is clear is that the Vikings had mastered the art of survival in the winter. It wasn't just about staying warm or having enough food. It was about managing every resource they had, from firewood to clothing to their shared knowledge of how to endure the elements. The Longhouse was more than just a home. It was a strategic tool in the battle against the cold. You think about the food again and how vital it is to your survival. It's not just about keeping your body warm, it's about nourishing it, giving it the energy it needs to keep fighting. The Vikings were careful with their food, storing it properly and using every bit of what they had. Nothing went to waste. The meat they salted and dried, the fish they smoked, and the roots they harvested all served one purpose: to make sure they had enough to get through the winter. Historians often discuss the Viking diet during these months, speculating about what exactly they ate to survive such harsh winters. Some argue that their diet was rich in protein from the animals they hunted, while others suggest that the Vikings relied more on root vegetables and grains to sustain them. Either way, the Vikings knew that food was a precious commodity, and every meal was carefully considered. It wasn't just about filling your stomach, it was about ensuring that you had enough to last until spring. As the fire continues to burn, you realize just how much goes into maintaining it. The heat is comforting, but you know that without constant attention it would quickly die down. It's the same with the community. Without constant effort, without the shared responsibility of survival, the cold would take over. The Vikings didn't just survive together. They thrived because they understood the importance of each individual's contribution. Each person had a role to play, from gathering firewood to preparing food, and together they created a sense of unity that made them stronger than the sum of their parts. The Longhouse, for all its simplicity, is the heart of Viking life. It's where everything happens, where food is shared, where warmth is gathered, and where the community comes together to face the cold. You feel the strength of that community as you sit by the fire, knowing that despite the chill outside, you are not alone. As the day winds down, the Longhouse grows quieter. The fire in the hearth flickers softly, casting warm shadows across the wooden walls. You feel the day's work settling into your bones, the tiredness creeping in from your muscles stiff from the cold. The wind outside picks up again, its howl pressing against the walls, but inside it's warm enough to relax for a moment at least. The comfort of the fire surrounds you, but you know that tomorrow the battle will start again. The fight against the cold, the constant work to keep the warmth alive. Inside the Longhouse there's a shared rhythm to the daily routine. The Vikings had no time for idle moments. Each task was purposeful, each action tied to the necessity of survival. The fire had to be maintained, the food preserved, the animals cared for. There was always something to do. But it wasn't just about staying alive. The Vikings had a way of living that embraced the struggle. They didn't simply endure the winter, they made it a part of their lives. And through it all, the Longhouse was the centre, the heart of their existence. Historians still debate whether the Vikings' harsh lifestyle was a result of necessity or choice. Was the brutal, unyielding winter merely an obstacle they had to survive, or was it something that shaped their identity, their very culture? Some scholars suggest that the Vikings' resilience and strength were born from this unrelenting cold, while others argue that their way of life was shaped more by their need to navigate the harsh climate of Scandinavia, adapting to it as a way to thrive rather than just survive. Either way, their survival strategies were a testament to their ingenuity, resourcefulness, and adaptability. It's easy to think of the Vikings as just warriors, but the true heart of their strength lay in their ability to adapt to a world that constantly pushed them to their limits. Their ability to work with the land and its harsh elements, to find ways to make the most of what they had, was what kept them alive. The Vikings didn't just build longhouses for shelter. They designed their homes to help them survive the brutal winters, incorporating features like sloped roofs to prevent snow build-up and thick walls made from logs and turf to trap warmth. As you sit by the fire, you think about the Longhouse as a living entity, a space that's more than just a building. It's a symbol of everything the Vikings were: tough, resilient, and resourceful. The fire that burns in the hearth is a constant reminder of their strength, of the effort it takes to survive in such a harsh world. But it's also a reminder of how far they've come. The Vikings knew that survival wasn't just about facing the elements, it was about creating a community, a place where warmth could be shared, where food could be gathered, and where life could continue despite the cold. The wind howls outside, but it doesn't matter. The warmth of the fire is enough for now. Tomorrow you'll face the cold again, but tonight you can rest in the knowledge that you're part of something greater. The Longhouse, with its warmth and its camaraderie, is your refuge. and as long as the fire burns you will endure. The night presses on, and the longhouse is filled with the low murmur of voices. The fire has settled into a steady glow, its warmth comforting against the chill that remains in the corners of the room. You glance around at the people gathered around the hearth. Some are telling stories, their voices soft but lively, while others sit quietly lost in their own thoughts. In a world where survival is a constant struggle, these moments of togetherness, of shared warmth, are what make everything bearable. The cold outside never truly goes away, though. It presses against the walls, creeping in through the cracks, reminding you that the world beyond the longhouse is an unforgiving one. Even here inside the Vikings could feel its presence. The fire, though constant, doesn't always offer enough warmth to keep the frost from settling into your bones. But the hearth is more than just a source of heat. It's the centre of life, a place of comfort and unity. The Viking community understood that surviving the winter wasn't just about the practical aspects of food, fire and shelter. It was about spirit. It was about coming together, facing the cold as a collective and relying on one another to make it through. Historians often reflect on the role of community in Viking survival, while many focus on the technological aspects of their lives. The tools they used, the materials they worked with others, suggest that it was their deep sense of community that was the true key to their endurance. The longhouse, with its cramped quarters and shared warmth, was more than just building. It was a place that brought people together in a way that reinforced the strength of the entire group. The cold outside could be fierce, but inside the longhouse there was a bond that no winter could break. You glance around at the people in the room. Some are eating, others are preparing for the night ahead. The smell of preserved meats and root vegetables fills the air, mingling with the scent of burning wood. These simple meals are enough to sustain them, enough to give them the energy they need to continue the struggle against the elements. It's a quiet reminder that every day in the Viking winter is a battle. But in this shared space there's a sense of purpose that makes everything feel more manageable. The food, though simple, is a lifeline. The Vikings didn't have the luxury of fresh food year-round. Instead, they preserved what they could, salted meats, dried fish and root vegetables, ensuring that they had enough to last through the winter. Scholars have long discussed the methods Vikings used to preserve their food, from drying to salting to smoking. Some argue that they had a unique understanding of how to store food for the long haul, while others suggest that they were simply masters of improvisation, using what was available to them to make sure nothing went to waste. It wasn't just the food, though. It was how they lived, how they interacted, and how they supported each other that allowed the Vikings to thrive in such a harsh environment. The cold was relentless, but it was the warmth of the community, the sense of unity that kept them going. Every moment of shared warmth, every meal, every night spent by the fire strengthened the bonds that held them together. It was a delicate balance between survival and spirit, between the need to endure the winter and the desire to maintain their humanity in the process. As you sit by the hearth, the flickering flames casting shadows on the walls, you realize that the Viking way of life was built on this balance. It wasn't just about enduring the winter, it was about finding ways to live through it, to find comfort even in the harshest of circumstances. The longhouse, the food, the fire, and the people around you were all part of a larger picture, one where every effort counted, where every small victory over the cold was celebrated. You draw the warmth of the fire, close pulling your blanket tighter around you as the night continues. The cold may still be there, pressing at the edges of your awareness, but for now, inside the longhouse, it's a battle you can face together. As the hours stretch into the night, the fire continues to burn its crackling sounds, providing a constant backdrop to the activities inside the longhouse. The warmth is a small comfort against the endless winter outside, but you know that warmth can't be taken for granted. It's a fleeting gift, and like everything in the Viking world, it must be protected, nurtured, and shared. The fire is not just the heart of the home, it's the heart of Viking survival itself. Without it, the longhouse would be nothing more than an icy shell, a fragile barrier between life and the harsh elements. You watch as people gather around the hearth, their faces illuminated by the dancing flames. There is a quiet serenity here despite the constant threat of the cold just beyond the walls. The space feels alive, though you can sense the weight of the years, the months of survival pressing down on everyone. The Vikings weren't just surviving winter, they were living through it. Every day was a delicate dance between the need for warmth and the reality of the outside world. Every meal, every action, every movement had to be measured, calculated to conserve energy and resources. The shared experience of winter, of being huddled together in this space, is something that defined Viking life. Historians often debate the significance of the Longhouse in Viking culture. Was it a symbol of survival, of community, or of both? The Longhouse wasn't just a building, it was a reflection of Viking resilience. Inside these walls, every moment of warmth, every shared meal was a testament to their ability to endure. The Vikings knew how to make the most of what little they had, whether it was the fur of animals, the wood from the trees around them, or the fire that burned at the centre of their homes. But the Longhouse was more than a physical shelter. It was a mental and spiritual refuge from the cold. For the Vikings, the harsh winters were a trial, but they were also a rite of passage. The Longhouse wasn't just a place to stay, it was a place to gather strength, to share stories, to forge bonds, and to celebrate the endurance of the human spirit. The shared experiences of battling the cold together created a sense of unity that went beyond physical survival. The warmth of the fire and the closeness of community became an essential part of the Viking identity. The food you eat here, simple as it may seem, is another cornerstone of survival. Preserved meats, dried fish and vegetables stored for the winter months provide the sustenance needed to endure. You think about the meals shared around the hearth, the quiet moments when everyone comes together after a long day's work. The food, like everything else, is a shared effort. Nothing goes to waste. Every part of an animal, every crop harvested is used to its fullest extent. The Vikings were masters of preservation, able to make what they had last through the long dark months. Scholars continue to explore the intricacies of Viking food preservation, from salting and drying to fermentation and smoking. Some argue that their methods were far more sophisticated than we realize, while others suggest that the Vikings had no choice but to develop such techniques to survive the bitter cold. Either way, it's clear that their survival depended not just on physical endurance, but also on a deep understanding of their environment and how to make use of every resource it provided. In the harsh winters, their knowledge of preservation techniques was as critical as their ability to build fire or shelter. As the fire crackles and the warmth spreads through the room, you think about the role of the community in keeping these traditions alive. The bonds formed in the Longhouse were crucial for survival, and they extended beyond family ties. The Vikings weren't just isolated units, they were part of a larger network, a shared culture that placed great importance on mutual support. The Longhouse, with its shared space and collective efforts, became a microcosm of Viking society as a whole. Each person had a role to play, from keeping the fire burning to maintaining the supplies and supporting one another. The wind outside howls again, but inside the Longhouse you feel a sense of peace, of belonging. The cold is still there, pressing at the edges, but it's a cold you know how to manage. Tomorrow you'll face the same struggles, the same challenges, but tonight you rest. You rest knowing that as long as the fire burns, as long as the community stands strong, you will endure. The night deepens, and the fire's warmth provides a gentle contrast to the bitter cold pressing against the Longhouse walls. You pull the furs tighter around your shoulders as you listen to the sound of wind howling outside. It's a constant companion, one that never seems to tire. But inside, the atmosphere is different. The Longhouse hums with the low voices of people talking and laughing, their presence a reminder that no matter how cold it gets, the Vikings are built to endure. The fire crackles softly, its warmth spreading throughout the room as people begin to settle in for the night. Even with the warmth, though the reality of winter is never far away, the Vikings' homes, while sturdy, were not impervious to the cold. The Longhouse offered protection, yes, but the temperature still fluctuated, and the cold seeped in through the cracks in the walls and roof. The Vikings knew this better than anyone. They understood that their survival didn't rest solely on the strength of their buildings, but on their ability to adapt to the elements. You look around noticing how every part of the longhouse serves a purpose. The benches along the walls, the thick low ceiling, the hearth at the centre, all of these things work in concert to create a space that can help protect against the harsh environment outside. Scholars often debate whether the Vikings' longhouses were truly efficient at keeping out the cold. Some argue that the heavy timber and turf construction, though effective for shelter, still couldn't completely ward off the chill of the Scandinavian winters. Others suggest that the communal nature of the longhouse played a critical role in maintaining warmth, with shared body heat offering the kind of comfort that the structure alone couldn't provide. Either way, it's clear that the longhouse was central to Viking survival, not just as a shelter, but as a community hub, a place where everyone came together to share warmth and resources. As you sit by the fire, you notice the faint smell of cooking meat in the air. The Vikings were not only skilled at surviving the cold, but also at preparing food that could sustain them through the long winter. Preservation methods like drying, salting and smoking were essential, and it wasn't just about storing food, it was about creating meals that were both nutritious and practical. The food you eat in the longhouse is simple, but it's enough. You can taste the saltiness of the preserved meat and the earthy depth of root vegetables, the staples of a Viking winter diet. Interestingly, food wasn't just for survival, it was also part of a ritual. Scholars still argue whether the Vikings' feasts and communal meals had a deeper social or spiritual significance. Some suggest that these meals often shared around the hearth were a way of fostering camaraderie and reinforcing social bonds. Others believe that they were a form of offering to the gods, a way of giving thanks for the resources that sustained them. Whatever the reason, food was a central part of Viking culture, and the longhouse was where it came alive. The shared meal was as much about maintaining community and honouring tradition as it was about fueling the body. The fire crackles and you can feel the heat radiating from it, but you also feel the cold just beyond its reach. It's a reminder that the Vikings' struggle against the elements was constant. Even in the warmth of the longhouse, they had to fight to keep the cold at bay. But they didn't just survive, it was more than that. The Vikings thrived in these conditions because they understood how to live with the land to use it to their advantage. Every tree felled for firewood, every pelt from a hunted animal, every piece of preserved food was a testament to their ingenuity and resilience. The night stretches on and the longhouse begins to quiet. People drift off to sleep, the warmth of the fire lulling them into rest. Tomorrow the battle against the cold will start again, but for now there's peace. The wind howls outside, but inside the longhouse you rest easy, knowing that as long as the fire burns and the community remains strong, you will face whatever comes. The night passes slowly with the wind still howling outside, but inside the longhouse there's a stillness that comes with the quiet rhythm of shared warmth and rest. The fire still burns softly in the hearth, casting flickering shadows on the walls. You wake to the familiar scent of wood smoke and the slight chill that has crept in during the night. There's no rush to get up. The cold is relentless, but for now, you're inside where the warmth lingers in the corners of the room. The morning is always the most challenging part of the day. The moment you step away from the warmth of your furs and blankets, the cold hits like a shock. The longhouse is warmer than the outside world, but it's not immune to the cold. You can feel the bite of it in the air, the sharpness that lingers no matter how much the fire crackles. It's the first true test of the day, whether or not you can shake off the chill and face what lies beyond the walls. You stand up stretching and the cold floor beneath your feet makes you wince. Your boots, worn but functional, are waiting by the door. You put them on feeling the comforting weight of the thick leather and fur lining and step outside into the unforgiving cold. The contrast between the warmth of the longhouse and the cold of the outside world is immediate and stark. The snow stretches as far as you can see, and the wind always present feels like it's cutting through to your bones. The world outside is frozen, a place that doesn't care if you're ready for it or not. The Vikings, accustomed to such extremes, didn't just endure the cold, they embraced it. Their ability to function in such harsh conditions was a learned skill, honed over generations of living with the land. Every day was a test of endurance. The ability to move quickly to keep your body warm with limited resources was vital. Historians still debate the methods Vikings used to combat the cold. Some suggest that the layers of clothing they wore made of animal hides and wool were essential to their survival. Others argue that their physical fitness, their active lifestyle, was what helped them endure the long winters. Either way, it's clear that the Vikings were far from passive in their struggle against the cold. They didn't just survive the winter, they mastered it. You look around at the landscape, the stark, icy beauty of it is undeniable. It's also a constant challenge. The Vikings understood that their homes, their communities and their lives depended on their ability to work with nature to make the most of what they had. The longhouse, with its heavy logs and thick turf walls, was a testament to their understanding of their environment. The fact that it could hold up against the fierce winds and freezing temperatures for years was a reflection of their ingenuity. As you step back inside, the warmth of the fire welcomes you again and you sigh in relief. The cold is still there lurking just outside, but you're inside now and here you can rest. But it's not just the fire that makes the longhouse a haven from the cold. It's the structure itself designed for survival in the harshest conditions. The thick walls, the slanted roof to shed snow, the communal space that keeps people close together. All of these features were built with the winter in mind. In fact, the layout of the longhouse was an important part of Viking survival. The fire wasn't just for warmth, it was for cooking, for light and for socializing. The space around the hearth became the heart of the community where meals were shared and stories were told. Vikings didn't just gather to eat and sleep, they gathered to strengthen their bonds to reinforce the sense of shared responsibility for survival. It wasn't enough to just live through the winter, you had to live with the winter together. Scholars continue to examine how the Vikings built their homes and adapted their environments to suit their needs. Some argue that the longhouses were an innovative solution to the problems posed by the harsh Nordic winters, while others suggest that the Vikings simply adapted to the environment by using what was available to them. Whatever the case, the longhouse was a symbol of Viking resilience, a space where life was not just sustained but lived to its fullest despite the cold. As you sit by the fire, you reflect on the resilience of those who built and lived in these homes. Every part of their lives was shaped by the cold, from the tools they used to the clothes they wore to the way they built their homes. The longhouse wasn't just a shelter from the storm, it was a reflection of the Viking spirit, a testament to their ability to endure and thrive in a world that was often unforgiving. The fire crackles softly in the hearth, filling the longhouse with its familiar warmth. As the night deepens, the shadows stretch long across the walls and the comforting presence of the flame provides a sense of peace in the midst of the relentless cold outside. The night, however, is never truly still. The wind howls and presses against the walls, reminding you that even in the shelter of the longhouse, the Viking struggle is never completely over. You pull your cloak tighter around your shoulders, knowing that the cold never fully releases its grip. It is a constant challenge, one that demands your attention, your endurance, and your ingenuity. Looking around, you notice the others settling in for the night. Some are already asleep, their bodies wrapped in furs, their breathing soft and steady. Others remain awake, talking quietly, sharing the day's stories and offering words of comfort. The Vikings knew that survival wasn't just about fighting the cold, it was about maintaining their sense of community. In the harshness of the winter months, the longhouse wasn't just a physical refuge, it was a place to preserve mental and emotional warmth as well. The cold may be an ever-present enemy, but is also a shared challenge, one that binds the community together. You realize that the true strength of the Viking people wasn't simply in their ability to withstand the winter. It was in their ability to thrive as a collective, to face the cold together and support one another through it. The bonds formed here around the fire in the warmth of the shared space are as vital as any survival strategy. This sense of unity is something that historians continue to debate when examining Viking society. Did the communal living in the longhouse provide the Vikings with a practical solution to surviving the cold? Or was it something deeper, something cultural, spiritual? Some scholars argue that the Vikings' tight-knit communities were a response to the environmental challenges they faced. In the frigid, isolated world they inhabited, the need for mutual support was critical. Others suggest that the communal structure of the Longhouse was a reflection of the Vikings' values, an emphasis on collaboration and collective effort that transcended mere survival. You consider the physical elements of Viking life, their ability to make use of what little they had. The Vikings lived in a world where resources were limited, where nothing could be wasted. Every part of the animals they hunted, every tree they felled, every scrap of food they preserved had a purpose. The Vikings were masters of making do, of turning every resource to their advantage. The Longhouse itself is a prime example of this resourcefulness. The walls were thick, made from logs and turf designed to trap heat and block out the cold. The roof was slanted to shed snow, allowing the Longhouse to endure the harshest winters. Yet despite these adaptations, there was always a struggle. The Vikings understood that the cold could never truly be beaten. It was a force that had to be managed, contained, and respected. The communal fire central to the Longhouse was a constant reminder of this struggle. The fire wasn't just for warmth, it was a symbol of the Vikings' perseverance, their unyielding determination to survive even in the face of the harshest conditions. In the quiet moments by the fire, you reflect on how survival in the Viking world was not just a physical challenge, it was also a mental one. How did they maintain their will to survive year after year, facing the same brutal conditions? The cold could wear down the body, but it could also wear down the spirit. Yet the Vikings endured because they found ways to adapt, to find strength in each other, in their shared experiences, in the resilience of their communities. Scholars continue to explore the psychological aspects of Viking survival. Was it the mental toughness of individuals that allowed them to endure? Or was it the strength of their social bonds? Could it have been the belief in their gods, the sense of purpose that faith provided, that gave them the fortitude to keep fighting against the cold? While no answer is definitive, it's clear that the Vikings' ability to survive winter wasn't just about managing the external elements. It was about managing the internal struggle, finding a way to hold on even when the world seemed unrelenting. The fire continues to burn brightly in the hearth, its warmth a fleeting comfort against the cold that still presses at the edges of your awareness. As the night stretches on, the wind outside howls again, but you remain inside, surrounded by the warmth of the fire and the people who share in the same struggle. Tomorrow, the battle against the cold will begin again, but for now, you rest. You rest knowing that no matter how fierce the cold, the strength of your community and the warmth of the fire will see you through another day. The warmth of the fire lingers in the air, but it is fleeting. As the night continues its slow passage, you can feel the cold creep back into the Longhouse, especially as the fire begins to settle into glowing embers. It's as if the cold is a living thing, always there, always pressing, always waiting for a moment of weakness to slip through the cracks. You draw your blanket tighter around you, feeling the coolness seeping into your skin, but you know this is temporary. The fire will be rekindled in the morning just as it is every day, and the cycle of warmth and cold will continue. You think about how the Vikings managed to stay warm during these long cold nights. It wasn't just about the fire or the clothing they wore. It was about their entire way of life designed to withstand and adapt to the harshest of conditions. Their homes, their clothing, their daily routines were all built around the need to survive the cold. They knew that staying warm wasn't just about one thing, it was a combination of everything they did. From the layers of fur and wool they wore to the way they constructed their longhouses to the way they lived in close quarters, warmth was a communal effort. Historians often debate whether the Vikings' survival strategies were a product of necessity or cultural choice. Were these adaptations simply practical solutions to the environment they lived in, or were they part of a deeper cultural understanding of survival? Some scholars argue that the harsh climate of Scandinavia shaped Viking society in profound ways, influencing everything from social structures to daily routines. Others suggest that the Vikings' ability to survive the cold was less about the environment and more about their mindset, about the way they approached life itself. In either case, it's clear that their culture, their communities, and their very homes were shaped by the unyielding cold that surrounded them. As you sit by the fire, you can't help but reflect on the ingenuity that went into creating the longhouse. The Viking longhouse was more than just shelter. It was a carefully designed structure, built with survival in mind. The walls made from logs and turf were designed to trap heat, and the slanted roof was made to prevent snow build-up. Yet despite all this effort, the longhouse was still at the mercy of the cold. The fire inside could only do so much to keep the chill at bay. So the Vikings adapted again, using their knowledge of the land, their tools, and their resourcefulness to make the most of what they had. The fire, always central to Viking life, plays an even more important role in the communal aspect of survival. As the night stretches on, you can feel the collective strength of everyone gathered around the hearth. The warmth from the fire is shared by all, and the sense of unity in this space makes the struggle against the cold feel less daunting. It's not just the fire that keeps the cold at bay, it's the presence of others. The closeness, the shared experience, the mutual support, these are as vital to survival as the fire itself. In a world where the cold is relentless, the strength of the community becomes a lifeline. Scholars still debate whether the Viking approach to community living was central to their survival, or whether it was simply a cultural norm that had other social and spiritual functions. Some historians believe that the Vikings' sense of unity, their tight-knit families and tribes, was critical to their ability to endure harsh conditions. Others argue that it was the practical benefits of communal living, the shared warmth of the combined efforts of the group, that were the driving forces behind their survival. Either way, there's no denying that the longhouse was a place where survival was a collective effort, where every member of the community had a role to play in facing the cold. The wind outside howls again, a constant reminder of the danger that lurks just beyond the warmth of the longhouse. But inside there's a feeling of security. The fire continues to burn its warmth, spreading through the room, offering comfort to those gathered around it. You're not alone in this. The cold is a fierce adversary, but together you know you can face it. The strength of the longhouse lies not just in its walls or its fire, but in the people who live within it. As the fire burns lower and the night presses on, you drift into a quiet sleep, knowing that tomorrow will bring more challenges, more work to keep the cold at bay. But for now there is warmth, there is rest, and there is the knowledge that no matter how harsh the winter, you are not alone. Morning breaks slowly, the light creeping in through the cracks in the longhouse walls. You wake to the familiar chill that fills the air, a sign that the fire has faded into embers once again. The warmth that filled the room last night is now just a memory, and the cold immediately wraps around you as you move. Your breath turns to mist in the air, and you quickly pull your cloak tighter around yourself, grateful for the layers that keep the worst of the cold at bay. The fire must be rekindled, and the work of the day begins again. You stand feeling the sharpness of the cold floor beneath your bare feet. The wooden floorboards, though solid, are cold enough to make your skin prickle with discomfort. It's a reminder that the fight against the cold never truly stops. The longhouse, despite its thick walls and turf insulation, can only do so much to keep the cold from infiltrating. The Vikings understood this well. They knew that every day was a fight and that the cold was something to be respected. Their ability to adapt and endure was born from generations of living in this harsh climate, from learning to manage the resources they had and make the most of every moment. The Vikings' survival didn't rest solely on their ability to build strong homes or craft durable clothing. It was their knowledge of the environment, of how to use the land, the animals, and even the weather itself to their advantage that allowed them to thrive. They knew when to move, when to stay, and when to prepare. The cold wasn't just an obstacle to be endured, it was a force to be understood. The longhouse with its communal hearth was a microcosm of Viking life itself, a place where every resource was used carefully, and where every task, no matter how small, was done with the goal of survival in mind. Historians still debate the Vikings' relationship with their environment. Some argue that their survival was purely a matter of necessity, that they were simply reacting to the challenges posed by the cold and their need for shelter. Others suggest that the Vikings were more proactive, that they shaped their environment to meet their needs. Whether it was their use of fire, the way they constructed their homes, or the tools they crafted, the Vikings knew how to adapt to the harsh winters of Scandinavia in ways that others might not have been able to. One of the most interesting aspects of Viking survival during the winter was their ability to work together. It wasn't just about the individual. Every person in the longhouse had a role to play, whether it was gathering firewood, preparing food, or maintaining the hearth. The sense of unity and shared responsibility was essential to enduring the long winters. The fire at the centre of the longhouse symbolised this unity. It wasn't just a source of warmth, it was a symbol of life itself, a force that brought people together in the fight against the cold. There is still much to learn about Viking society, and scholars continue to debate the reasons behind their ability to endure such extreme conditions. Some suggest that the Vikings' reliance on community and cooperation was the secret to their survival, while others argue that their physical endurance and toughness were what allowed them to survive. It's likely a combination of both. After all, the Vikings were not just strong individuals, they were strong as a group, as a society bound together by necessity and by shared goals. As you step outside the longhouse, you feel the full force of the cold hit you. The snow crunches beneath your boots and the wind cuts through your cloak sharp and biting. You pull the hood up over your head, huddling against the cold, but it's not enough to stop the chill from working its way into your bones. The Vikings knew that it was important to keep moving to stay active and alert during the coldest months. They didn't have the luxury of staying inside all day. Every movement had to be purposeful. There was always something to do: chop firewood, gather food, check the livestock. The cold demanded constant action. You pause for a moment, taking in the frozen landscape before you. The snow stretches out in every direction, a vast white wasteland that seems endless. It's a stark reminder of just how harsh the world outside the longhouse can be. But it's also beautiful in its own way, a testament to the Viking ability to adapt to live in harmony with the land, no matter how unforgiving it might seem. As you make your way back inside, you feel the warmth of the hearth greeting you once more. The fire has been rekindled, and the longhouse begins to fill with its familiar heat. It's not perfect, but it's enough to keep the cold at bay, to give you a moment of peace before the next wave of winter sets in. The struggle continues, but for now you are safe. Inside the longhouse, the fire burns brightly, its glow spreading warmth across the room. The sound of crackling wood fills the air, providing a soothing soundtrack to the busy movements of the people around the hearth. There is a sense of calm here, a familiarity in the rhythm of daily life. The Vikings, despite the harshness of the winters they faced, had found ways to make life inside the longhouse manageable, even comfortable. The fire, the shared meals, the closeness of community, it was all part of a delicate balance that kept them going. But the cold, though it may be kept at bay for a time, never truly leaves. It lurks outside, pressing against the walls, constantly reminding the Vikings of its presence. Even inside, the temperature shifts with the rhythm of the fire, and the comfort it provides is fleeting. As you sit by the hearth, you realise that survival here requires more than just maintaining warmth. It's about adapting to the ever-changing conditions. Every day, every task is about working with the environment, finding ways to make the best of what you have. Historians often debate whether the Vikings were simply reacting to the harsh conditions of their environment, or if they were actively shaping their world to meet their needs. Some believe that their ability to thrive was rooted in their physical endurance and toughness. Others suggest that their success came from their innovative use of resources and their ability to work together as a community. Regardless of the interpretation, what is clear is that the Vikings' survival in such extreme conditions was no accident. It was a result of their ingenuity, adaptability, and unyielding determination to thrive. The longhouse itself was a key element in this survival strategy. Its design was simple but effective. The thick walls made from timber and turf helped trap heat, while the slanted roof prevented the accumulation of snow. The fire at the centre of the room provided warmth and light, while the shared space fostered a sense of unity and community. Every part of the longhouse, from its construction to its layout, was designed to work in harmony with the environment. It wasn't just a place to live, it was a tool for survival. You look around at the others in the longhouse, their faces lit by the firelight. Some are talking quietly, others are preparing food, while a few sit in contemplative silence. There is a sense of ease here, but it's a quiet kind of ease, one that comes from knowing that the work never stops. The Vikings didn't just survive in these conditions, they built a life. And that life, though often difficult and demanding, was one they shaped with their own hands. Food, too, was a vital part of this survival. The Vikings knew that in order to endure the cold, they had to have enough nourishment to keep their bodies strong. Their diet was simple yet effective, consisting mostly of preserved meats, dried fish, and root vegetables. These foods, though not always flavourful by modern standards, were a lifeline during the long winter months. Scholars still debate the specifics of Viking nutrition, with some suggesting that their reliance on salt-preserved food was essential to their survival, while others point to the role of fermented foods like beer, dairy, in providing necessary nutrients. Either way, the Vikings knew that eating was as much about endurance as it was about sustenance. As you eat, you reflect on the longhouse's role in making this possible. It wasn't just a shelter, it was a place where survival was crafted day by day through the shared efforts of everyone inside. The longhouse was both a home and a fortress, a safe space that offered protection from the cold and a sense of belonging in the face of an unforgiving world. The wind picks up again howling outside, but inside the longhouse you're surrounded by warmth and community. The cold may still be there just beyond the walls, but for now you are safe. The fire continues to burn and the people around you continue their work, supporting one another in a shared mission to survive and thrive. The longhouse in all its simplicity is the heart of Viking life. It's where warmth is found, where food is shared, and where the bonds of community are forged. Tomorrow the cold will return, but for tonight there is warmth, there is rest, and there is the knowledge that no matter how fierce the winter outside may be, inside the longhouse you will continue to endure together. The fire crackles as the night deepens, sending dancing shadows across the longhouse. It's a familiar sight now, one you've seen night after night, as the warmth from the hearth fills the room and the wind outside howls relentlessly. Inside, however, there's a quiet sense of peace, a contrast to the cold that presses against the walls. You sit back, feeling the heat of the fire against your skin, your muscles relaxing into the comfort of the warmth. Yet you know that the cold is never far away. It's always just beyond the walls, reminding you that survival here isn't guaranteed, it's earned. The Vikings, it seems, were always aware of this. The fire, though essential to their survival, was a fleeting luxury, one that required constant care. The hearth was tended to day and night, and the wood, the logs, and the kindling had to be replenished regularly. But it wasn't just the fire that made life in the longhouse possible. The Vikings were experts in using every resource at their disposal to survive the harsh winters. Their clothing, made from animal hides and furs, was designed to trap heat and keep out the cold. They didn't have the modern materials we rely on today, but they understood the importance of layers and insulation. Historians still debate whether the Vikings' clothing was as effective as we believe it was. Some argue that their layered fur and wool garments were critical to their survival, while others claim that the cold still managed to penetrate even the thickest layers. Regardless, what is clear is that their clothing was part of a larger survival strategy, one that extended beyond just warmth. The Vikings, living in a harsh environment, relied on their resourcefulness and knowledge of the land to ensure they could endure. The longhouse itself, though, simple in its design, was another key element in the survival. The structure was designed to trap as much heat as possible, with thick timber walls and a slanted roof that shed the snow. The space inside was limited, with benches lining the walls and families sleeping close together for warmth. The Vikings didn't just build these homes to endure the cold, they designed them to work in harmony with their environment to make the most of what was available. Yet despite the design of their homes and the effectiveness of their clothing, there were still moments when the cold won. The fire could only burn so long, and the cold would always find its way into the longhouse eventually. The Vikings understood this. They knew that survival wasn't about eliminating the cold, it was about managing it, about finding ways to cope with it without letting it defeat them. The fire in the hearth, the layers of clothing, and the shared warmth of the longhouse all worked together to make the struggle against the cold more bearable. Scholars often argue whether the Vikings' ability to endure the cold was due to their physical resilience or their mental fortitude. Some suggest that the cold tested their strength both physically and mentally, and that it was this test that forged their character. Others claim that it was their communal way of life that gave them the strength to survive. The Vikings were not alone in their struggle against the cold, they faced it together. The longhouse, as much a communal space as a shelter, became a place where the bonds of family and friendship were strengthened by the shared experience of surviving the harsh winter months. You glance around this longhouse, watching the people move about, preparing for the night ahead. Some are gathering firewood, while others are arranging the furs that will serve as bedding. The scent of preserved meat lingers in the air, and the crackling of the fire fills the silence. There is no hurry here. Time seems to slow down inside the longhouse, as if the outside world with its cold and its dangers is just a distant memory. The focus is on the present, on the warmth of the fire and the closeness of the people around you. The wind outside picks up again, but inside it's a different world. The fire burns low but steady, offering enough warmth to ward off the cold that threatens to return. The longhouse may not be perfect, it may never be warm enough to forget the cold outside completely, but for now it's enough. Tomorrow the cold will return, but tonight the fire continues to burn and the warmth of the community remains. As the hours stretch into the night, the longhouse remains a constant source of warmth and comfort. The fire crackles steadily in the hearth, its warmth filling the room, and the sound of soft conversation hums in the background. You settle into the familiar rhythm of life here, the soft crackling of the fire, and the occasional murmur of voices becoming a lullaby of sorts. Despite the biting cold outside, there is a sense of safety inside. Here among the people you share your life with, the winter feels less formidable. You reflect on the days spent in the longhouse, the years spent adapting to the harsh conditions of Viking life. Each winter was a reminder of the fragility of life, but also of the strength of the Viking spirit. The longhouse, with its thick walls and communal warmth, was a symbol of their ability to endure to live in a world where survival was never guaranteed but always fought for. It was not just the structure that kept them safe, it was the unity of the people inside. Together they faced the cold, the isolation and the challenges that came with living in such a harsh environment. Historians still debate the role of the Viking longhouse in their survival strategy. Was it primarily the physical structure of the longhouse, designed to trap heat and shelter from the storm, that made it effective? Or was it the community living within it? Some believe the architectural design of the longhouse was more than sufficient to protect against the cold, while others suggest that the real secret to Viking survival was the communal aspects, the shared warmth, the collective effort to keep the fire going, and the sense of togetherness that helped them endure. Whichever side of the debate one falls on, what is indisputable is that the longhouse served a critical function in the Viking way of life. The fire in the hearth continues to burn, but the cold never fully retreats. As the wind howls outside, you feel a deep sense of appreciation for the warmth it breeds. There is something comforting about the crackling of the wood, the flickering flames casting long shadows across the room. It's a small, fleeting warmth that offers you a moment of respite, but in this world where the cold can consume you, it feels like everything. Food, too, plays its part in this survival. You think about the meals shared in the longhouse, the simple but nourishing fare that sustained the Vikings through the long months of winter. Preserved meat, salted fish and root vegetables formed the bulk of their diet, but they made it work. The meals may have been modest by modern standards, but in this world they were essential. The Vikings knew how to make the most of what they had, turning simple ingredients into sustenance that would carry them through the harshest of winters. Some scholars suggest that Viking diets were not only focused on survival, but also on maintaining strength and health during the winter months. The preservation methods, salt drying and smoking, ensured that the food could be stored for long periods, but they also provided essential nutrients that kept the Vikings going during the dark months. Historians still debate whether their diet was enough to fully nourish them, or if the cold itself limited their access to fresh food sources, making preservation techniques all the more important. You turn your attention back to the fire, watching as the flames flicker and dance, casting a warm glow over the room. The fire is a source of comfort, but it is also a reminder of the effort it takes to keep it burning. The Vikings understood that survival was not guaranteed. It was something they had to fight for every day. Every log added to the fire, every piece of food preserved for the winter, and every shared moment of warmth was part of the effort to endure. It wasn't just about surviving the cold, it was about learning how to live with it, how to make it a part of life without letting it define you. As the fire burns low, you think about the strength it took to face the winter day in and day out. The Vikings didn't just endure, they thrived in their own way. They didn't conquer the cold, but they found a way to live with it, to build lives around it. And through it all, the Longhouse was their refuge, a place where warmth and community could still flourish even in the coldest of winters. As the fire begins to flicker lower, the warmth it provides feels more precious with each passing minute. You lean closer to the hearth, trying to save the last bit of heat before it fades completely. The cold outside is a constant presence, a force that never stops pushing, never stops reminding you of the world beyond these walls. Inside the Longhouse, though, there is a certain kind of peace. The fire, the community, the shared sense of survival, all of it comes together in these moments, making the winter feel less like a battle and more like something to be endured together. You glance around at the others, watching them settle in for the night. There is no rushing, no frantic movement. Instead, there is a calm understanding that the night will pass as it always does, slowly, steadily. The wind may howl outside, but within these walls, there is stillness. The Longhouse is full of life, each person playing their part in the shared experience of winter. You feel the quiet hum of existence around you, the shared warmth, the conversations, the subtle creaks of the wooden walls as the structure adjusts to the shifting temperature. Historians still debate the true impact of communal living on Viking survival. Some suggest that the close quarters where every person was always near others helped create stronger bonds that were necessary to face the challenges of winter. The warmth of human proximity was as essential as the fire itself, a social glue that helped the community endure. Others argue that this kind of living, so close and intimate, could have led to tension and discomfort, with the cold exacerbating feelings of isolation or frustration. Regardless, it's clear that the Vikings' abilities to survive the long winters was deeply tied to their communal way of life. The Longhouse was a symbol of this, more than just a shelter, but a space where every person contributed to the collective survival. Food, too, was an integral part of the daily life here. You think about the preserved meats and dried fish that sustained the Vikings through these months of isolation. The food may seem simple, even sparse, but it is enough. The preservation methods, salting, drying and smoking, are all part of the Viking approach to life. Scholars still debate whether the Vikings had a particular method of food preservation that was uniquely suited to their environment. Some believe that their reliance on salted fish and preserved meats was a matter of practicality, while others suggest that these foods also played a cultural role, reflecting the Viking values of self-sufficiency and resilience. Whatever the case, the Vikings knew how to make the most of what they had, and they knew how to make it last. You listen to the soft murmur of voices around you, the conversation low and soothing. The fire, though dying, still crackles with life, and the warmth it provides feels comforting in its simplicity. The cold may still be out there, pressing against the Longhouse, but inside there is a sense of peace. The night stretches on, each passing hour blending into the next. The struggle against the cold is never fully over, but for now there is rest. Tomorrow the work of survival will begin again, but tonight you can simply be. The Longhouse, the fire, the food, all of it is a reminder that survival is not just about enduring hardship. It's about finding ways to live within that hardship, to make it a part of your life without allowing it to consume you. The Vikings did not conquer the cold, they simply lived with it, adapted to it, and found ways to thrive despite it. The fire that burns low now is not just a symbol of warmth, it's a symbol of life itself, of endurance, of the human spirit that refuses to be defeated. As the fire dims and the room grows colder, you feel a quiet sense of gratitude for the warmth you have shared tonight. The cold may return, but for now you rest in the knowledge that within these walls you are not alone. The fire will burn again tomorrow, and together you will face the winter once more. As the fire's glow softens, the Longhouse becomes a quiet haven in the heart of a harsh frozen world. The steady crackle of burning wood is the only sound, creating a rhythm that seems to steady the very air around you. You wrap yourself more tightly in your cloak, the warmth it provides a fleeting comfort in this ongoing struggle. Outside the wind howls, but inside you are surrounded by the stillness that comes with the cold night. The fire keeps the worst of it at bay, but you know it won't last forever. Tomorrow you'll fight the cold again, but for now you settle into the familiar calm of the Longhouse. The design of the Longhouse itself plays a crucial role in this shared comfort. Built to withstand the challenges of Viking winters, it is sturdy yet simple, its walls thick with timber and turf. The slanted roof sheds the snow, allowing it to slide away rather than accumulating and weighing down the structure. The hearth at the centre is the heart of this space, but while the fire provides warmth, it's the way the Longhouse pulls everyone together that truly matters. The shared warmth is not just about the heat, it's about the community that grows from it. The closeness, the shared meals, the conversations around the fire, all of it works in tandem to create a space where survival is a collective effort. Historians continue to debate how the Vikings were able to endure such brutal winters. Some claim that it was the strength of their homes, like the Longhouse, that enabled them to survive, while others argue that their survival was more about their adaptability. The structure of their homes, while functional, was only one part of the equation. The real strength came from the way the Vikings lived, how they made use of every resource, how they relied on each other, and how they created a sense of community that allowed them to withstand not just the cold, but everything that came with it. The warmth you feel now shared with others is a physical manifestation of that community. It isn't just the fire, it's the collective spirit that makes the cold easier to bear. The communal aspect of Viking life was essential to their survival, as much a part of the struggle as the physical tools they had at their disposal. The shared warmth from the hearth, the way bodies huddled together for sleep, each person offering a small part of themselves to the others, kept the worst of the cold at bay. It was a survival mechanism, one rooted not just in physical closeness, but in the trust and dependence they placed in each other. You can almost hear the whispers of those who have come before you, their voices blending into the crackle of the fire. They too faced the same battle, fought the same fight against the cold, and found ways to live in harmony with their environment. The Longhouse was a part of that, a testament to their ingenuity, but also to their perseverance. The Vikings knew that survival wasn't just about physical strength. It was about mental resilience, the ability to keep going, even when the world outside seemed determined to take everything from you. Every night spent inside, every meal shared around the hearth, was a victory in itself. The Vikings didn't just endure the winter, they adapted to it. Their homes, their clothing, their methods of preserving food. They were all part of a broader strategy to live in a land that could be as beautiful as it was unforgiving. They didn't see the cold as something to be conquered, but as something to be understood. It was a part of the landscape, as much a part of their lives as the fire, the food, and the people who surrounded them. They didn't just fight the cold, they learned to coexist with it, to make it a part of their daily lives. Scholars still wonder about the psychological effects of living in such a harsh environment. Was the Viking resilience born of the extreme cold, or did their way of life, shaped by necessity, foster a mindset that could endure any hardship? Some believe that the long winters forged a mental toughness, a spirit of endurance that carried the Vikings through even the most difficult times. Others argue that the isolation of the long winters played a role in developing this mental fortitude, forcing the Vikings to rely on themselves and each other for survival. Regardless of the cause, what is clear is that the Vikings were uniquely suited to endure the cold and thrive in spite of it. As the fire dims and the shadows lengthen, the stillness of the longhouse takes on a new meaning. The cold, though pressing against the walls, is no longer something to fear. Here inside you are not alone. The warmth of the fire, the closeness of the people around you, and the knowledge that you are part of something greater make the fight against the cold seem less insurmountable. The fire may burn lower, but the spirit of the longhouse of survival, of community, and of resilience remains. The night deepens and the warmth from the hearth begins to fade, leaving behind only a gentle glow that flickers and dances in the quiet of the longhouse. The fire, though comforting, is a reminder of the fragility of warmth in a world so cold. You curl up further into your blanket, feeling the warmth that was once shared by all slowly recede as the temperature drops with the passing hours. Outside, the wind still howls, but in here you feel a sense of solidarity, of community that gives you the strength to endure. The cold is relentless, but it is also part of the rhythm of life here. The Vikings understood this well. They didn't just survive winter. They made it a part of their lives, adapted to it, and created systems that allowed them to thrive within its constraints. Their longhouses, though simple in design, were engineered for survival. Every aspect of their homes, from the materials used to construct them to the layout of the interior, was designed to make life easier during the harsh winters. Historians continue to explore the ways in which Viking homes contributed to their survival. Some argue that the longhouse was more than just a shelter. It was a physical and social anchor in a world that could be harsh and unforgiving. Others claim that it was the Viking mindset, their ability to adapt and work together, that was the real key to surviving the cold winters. Whatever the case may be, one thing is clear: the longhouse, with its central hearth and communal layout, played a critical role in Viking life, offering warmth, shelter, and a space for the community to come together. The shared warmth of the fire, the sense of closeness created by living together in close quarters, was as much a survival strategy as any physical adaptation. The Vikings weren't just relying on the fire to keep them warm, they were relying on each other. The communal nature of the longhouse meant that no one faced the cold alone. Everyone contributed, whether by tending the fire, preparing food, or simply offering companionship during the long dark hours of winter. The bonds formed here around the hearth were as essential to survival as any practical resource. You can almost imagine the stories that would have been told around the fire, the legends of gods and heroes, of triumphs and tragedies. The warmth of the fire didn't just provide heat, it provided a space for connection, for the sharing of knowledge, for passing down traditions and stories. The Vikings knew that surviving the winter wasn't just about staying warm, it was about keeping the spirit alive, about ensuring that the stories and memories of those who came before them lived on. The longhouse was a space where life, despite the cold, could still flourish. Food was another essential part of this survival. The Vikings relied heavily on preserved food, using methods like salting, smoking, and drying to make their resources last through the winter. The preserved meat, dried fish, and root vegetables were staples of their diet, providing the necessary sustenance to get them through the long months. Scholars still debate whether the Vikings' diet was as well balanced as it could have been, or if their reliance on preserved food limited their nutritional intake. But it's clear that they were resourceful, making the most of what they had. As you sit back by the fire, you think about how much effort went into everything. From preserving food to maintaining the fire to the physical labour of gathering firewood and building homes, survival in the Viking world was an ongoing collective effort. There was no room for complacency. Each task, each small decision was part of the larger goal of enduring the cold and surviving through another winter. And yet, despite all the effort, the community came together united in their shared struggle against the harshest of elements. The cold outside may never fully go away, but inside the longhouse there is warmth. The fire continues to burn, and with it the spirit of the community. The Vikings knew that survival wasn't just about conquering the cold, it was about living alongside it, adapting and ensuring that every day was met with strength, resilience and unity. The Longhouse wasn't just a shelter, it was a place where life could continue, where warmth could be found and where survival could be achieved through shared effort. As the night wears on, the fire's glow becomes a soft reminder of the warmth that surrounded you earlier. The crackling of the embers is a quiet, comforting sound in the otherwise still Longhouse. The cold outside may be relentless, but in this space the cold feels a little less threatening, though it never fully disappears. You wrap your furs more tightly around you, trying to hold on to the warmth as long as possible. But in the end, the night will pass, the fire will burn lower, and the cold will once again take its place. Vikings lived in a world where their surroundings were both a source of life and a constant threat. The environment shaped their lives in ways that might seem unimaginable today. They didn't just survive the harsh winters, they learned to live in harmony with them. The Longhouse was a testament to their ability to adapt. It wasn't just a physical structure, it was a living, breathing example of Viking ingenuity. Every log, every layer of turf, every beam and beam end had been chosen and placed to maximize warmth, to minimize the intrusion of the cold and to keep their community safe from the brutal outside world. Historians still debate the impact of the environment on Viking culture. Some argue that the Vikings were shaped by the harsh winters they endured, suggesting that their culture was built around resilience and adaptability. Others argue that it was not the winters themselves, but the Vikings' relationship with their land and their ability to make use of the resources it provided that defined their way of life. The cold, while present in every corner of their world, was just one element that the Vikings learned to navigate. Their culture was more than just a response to the cold, it was about using every aspect of their environment to ensure their survival. The community aspect of Viking life is also a crucial piece of the puzzle. You glance around at the people gathered near the fire, each person contributing to the collective effort to keep the warmth alive. Some gather firewood, others prepare food, and some simply sit in quiet companionship. Each role, no matter how small, is essential. The Longhouse was designed to bring people together not just for survival, but for the strength that came from working as a unit. No one person could have survived alone. It was the support of the entire community that ensured their continued existence. This shared responsibility wasn't just about physical labour, it was about emotional and mental resilience as well. Scholars continue to explore whether Viking social structures were centred on cooperation or competition. Were the Vikings bound together by necessity, or was there a deeper cultural understanding that unity was the key to survival? Some believe that the harsh winters and isolation of Viking life forced them to work together in a way that created strong, unbreakable bonds. Others argue that the Vikings were competitive by nature, and their survival was shaped by their need to outlast and outwit the cold, the landscape, and sometimes even each other. Whatever the truth, it's clear that the Longhouse wasn't just a place to sleep. It was a space where the strength of the collective allowed the individuals within it to endure. Food was another essential component of this community survival. You think about the preserved meats, the dried fish, the salted vegetables. These simple meals were not just necessary for survival, they were a cultural practice. The Vikings didn't just preserve food for the winter months, they did it with care, with a purpose. The methods they used from drying to smoking were a testament to their resourcefulness. Some historians suggest that the Vikings' knowledge of food preservation was an advanced skill developed over generations, while others claim it was a necessary tactic for survival. Either way, it's clear that food preservation was a skill that allowed the Vikings to thrive in a world where fresh produce was scarce during the winter. As you sit by the fire, the soft murmur of voices and the warmth filling the room make you feel a quiet sense of peace. Despite the cold pressing at the edges of your consciousness, you know that tonight at least the battle has been won. The fire burns on, the food sustains, and the community is strong. Tomorrow the cycle will begin again, but for now, You rest knowing that within these walls, no matter how fierce the cold outside may be, you are part of something that endures. The fire continues to burn low, casting a soft orange glow across the longhouse. The warmth, though comforting, doesn't last forever. It's fleeting, and the cold always seems to sneak in when you least expect it. You huddle closer to the hearth, feeling the last remnants of heat seep into your bones. The cold is an ever-present force in Viking life, a constant reminder that survival is never easy. Yet despite its relentless nature, the cold never completely overpowers the warmth inside. It's a strange coexistence, one that the Vikings learned to live with, an ongoing battle between warmth and cold that defined their existence. You think about the people around you gathered close to the fire, the warmth of their bodies, the shared experience of surviving another day in the cold creates a sense of solidarity that cuts through the isolation of the winter months. The Vikings understood that surviving the winter wasn't just about staying warm. It was about coming together, sharing the burden of survival and relying on one another to endure. The Longhouse was designed to bring people together in the face of the cold, and it succeeded in doing so. Historians continue to debate how the Vikings' communal living affected their survival strategies. Some argue that the Longhouse, with its shared warmth and close quarters, helped foster a sense of unity that was essential to their survival. Others claim that such close living conditions might have led to tension and discomfort, making survival more difficult than necessary. What is clear is that the communal aspect of Viking life played a significant role in their ability to endure the winters. The Longhouse wasn't just a shelter from the cold, it was a place where the warmth of shared survival helped the Vikings push through the darkest months. You think about the daily routines that helped to maintain this balance, gathering firewood, preparing food, and keeping the hearth burning. These were the small but essential tasks that allowed the Vikings to stay warm, to stay fed, and to stay connected. The fire wasn't just for warmth, it was for light, for cooking, and for keeping the cold at bay. It was the focal point of life in the Longhouse, and everyone played a part in keeping it alive. Food too was essential to survival. The Vikings didn't have access to the fresh produce that we take for granted today, so they relied on preserved meat, salted fish, and root vegetables to get through the winter. Scholars still debate how nutritious this diet really was. Some argue that the Vikings ate a well-balanced diet that kept them healthy and strong, while others suggest that their reliance on preserved food may have led to nutritional deficiencies. Whatever the case, it is undeniable that the Vikings were resourceful, using every method available to preserve their food and make it last through the long winter months. As you sit near the hearth, the warmth slowly fading as the fire dies down, you reflect on how much the Vikings had to adapt to survive. The Longhouse, their food preservation methods, and their clothing were all carefully crafted to help them endure the brutal winters. Yet it wasn't just their physical resources that helped them survive. It was their mental resilience, their ability to find strength in one another and in their shared way of life. The Longhouse was a symbol of that strength, a place where the cold, though never fully defeated, was kept at bay by the warmth of the fire and the unity of the people within. The wind howls outside again, but inside the Longhouse there is a peace. The fire burns lower, but it will be rekindled tomorrow just as it has been every day before. The cold will return, but for now, there is warmth, there is rest, and there is the knowledge that survival despite the cold is a shared effort. The wind howls relentlessly outside, a constant reminder of the world beyond the Longhouse's sturdy walls. Inside, the fire burns low, its warmth still offering a sense of comfort in the otherwise still air. The night feels long, the temperature dropping with each passing hour. The cold is a quiet presence, like a shadow at the edges of the room. It's there just beyond the fire's reach, a force that never truly disappears, but simply waits for you to become complacent. As you sit close to the hearth, the warmth from the dying flames wraps around you, but you know it won't last forever. The fire has to be tended to again in the morning, another task in the ongoing battle to keep the cold at bay. Yet despite the fleeting warmth, there's something about the shared experience of it all that feels comforting. You're not alone in this struggle. The Longhouse, with its rough-hewn beams and thick walls, provides a sense of security, a physical refuge against the elements. but it's the people inside that make the real difference. It's the strength of the community that helps everyone endure together. The communal living space of the Longhouse with its close quarters was an essential part of Viking survival. Some historians suggest that the Vikings' resilience stemmed from their ability to live in such tight-knit communities, while others believe that the isolation of the harsh winters only served to reinforce their bonds. Either way, it's clear that the Longhouse was more than just shelter. It was a space where Viking society was built, where individuals came together to face the cold, the darkness, and the challenges of the world outside. The fire flickers again, sending a fresh warmth through the room. You close your eyes for a moment, listening to the sounds around you, the quiet conversations, the soft breathing of those settled in for the night, and the crackling of the wood. The cold may be out there, but in here it's manageable. The people around you help keep it that way, each person contributing to the collective warmth. And as the night wears on, you realize that this shared effort is the true source of Viking strength. They did not simply survive, they lived together through the cold. Thinking back on the day's tasks, you realize how much of Viking life was tied to this daily effort to survive. Every moment, every action was shaped by the environment they lived in. The fire wasn't just for warmth, it was for light, it was for cooking, and it was the centerpiece of the Longhouse. It was as much a tool for survival as the clothes they wore or the food they preserved. The cold never truly left, but the fire made it bearable, and the collective effort to keep it going gave the Vikings the strength to keep facing the days ahead. Food, too, was a critical part of the equation. The Vikings didn't have access to fresh food year-round, so preserving what they had was essential. They salted, dried, and smoked their meats and fish, ensuring they had enough to make it through the winter. Scholars still debate how nutritionally balanced this diet was, but the Vikings knew how to make every bit of food last. Each preserved fish, every salted cut of meat, and the root vegetables stored away were lifelines that allowed the community to continue despite the long winter months. As you sit back feeling the warmth of the fire against your skin, you think about how much effort it took to survive these months. The cold never truly took a break, but the Vikings had learned to live with it. They adapted using every resource at their disposal, from fire to food to community, to make it through. The Longhouse was a central part of this system, a place where survival wasn't just a physical feat, but a shared experience, a collective effort to endure. The cold could still press against the walls, but inside there was warmth, there was life, and there was the undeniable strength of the community. The fire now crackles softly, its light flickering gently on the faces of the people gathered around it. The warmth is beginning to wane, but it's still enough to ward off the chill in the air. You pull your cloak tighter around you, trying to preserve the last bit of heat before the night stretches on further. The cold never really leaves, but tonight at least the Longhouse feels safe. The wind may howl outside, but here within these walls the community provides the warmth that the fire can't always give. Vikings living in a world defined by brutal winters knew that surviving these conditions wasn't just about the strength of their homes or the clothing they wore. It was about how they adapted, how they made the most of every resource available to them. The fire in the hearth, the thick walls of the Longhouse, the clothes crafted from animal furs. Each aspect of Viking life was connected, working together to help them survive. Yet it wasn't just the physical tools that helped the Vikings endure. It was their ability to come together as a community, to share warmth, to work as one. Scholars still examine whether it was the Vikings' ability to live communally that gave them their edge. Were the bonds they formed in the Longhouse, huddling together for warmth and sharing meals, what made the winters more bearable? Or was it their independent spirit, their physical strength that helped them push through? Some argue that the communal living style fostered a deep sense of interdependence essential for survival, while others suggest that the Viking focus on personal endurance was the true source of their strength. Regardless, the Longhouse as both shelter and social centre was key to their success. Food also played a huge role in Viking survival. As you sit near the fire, you can almost taste the preserved meats and salted fish that sustained the community during these cold months. Their diet was simple but effective. Preserved food allowed the Vikings to weather the months when fresh food was scarce. Scholars are still unsure whether the Vikings' preserved diet was as balanced as it should have been. Some suggest they may have suffered from a lack of variety in their diet, while others believe they were able to maintain their strength with the resources they had. Either way, it is clear that their ability to store food and make it last was critical to their survival. The Vikings' methods for preserving food weren't just practical, they were born out of necessity. Salt drying and smoking were essential tools for ensuring that food didn't spoil before it could be consumed. The reliance on preserved foods meant that Vikings had to plan ahead, ensuring they gathered and stored enough to last them through the harshest months. In a world where the cold could kill and food could run out, the ability to keep food safe and available was a matter of life or death. Even as the fire continues to burn low, the knowledge that these practices have kept generations of Vikings alive fills the Longhouse with a quiet sense of pride. The cold might return in the morning, but tonight you are surrounded by warmth, physical and emotional. The collective effort of the community, the shared responsibility for keeping the fire alive and the food stored is what has allowed the Vikings to survive these winters season after season. The Viking way of life, with its adaptability, resourcefulness and communal strength, was built around the challenges of the environment. They didn't simply fight the cold, they coexisted with it, learning to use it to shape their culture, their homes and their daily routines. The Longhouse, with its warmth and its communal nature, was at the heart of this way of life. And as the fire begins to die down, you know that tomorrow the same efforts will be made again to endure, to survive, and to live with the cold together. The fire continues to burn low, its warmth a comforting but fleeting presence in the Longhouse. As the embers glow softly in the hearth, you can feel the cold creeping back into the room, a reminder that the night is far from over. The wind still howls outside, but inside there is peace, a sense of calm despite the biting cold beyond the walls. The shared warmth of the fire offers a sense of security, but it's the presence of the community around you that truly makes the cold feel less overwhelming. The closeness, the shared effort to survive brings a sense of comfort that the fire alone can't provide. Looking around at the people in the Longhouse, you realize that the battle against the cold is not fought alone. Each person plays a role in keeping the warmth alive, whether by adding fuel to the fire, preparing food, or simply offering company. The cold may press against the walls, but together the community keeps it at bay. This shared responsibility is as vital to survival as any practical measure. The fire in the hearth is a powerful force, but it is the people who sustain it and each other through the harshest of winters. Historians still argue whether the key to Viking survival lay more in their communal lifestyle or their physical resilience. Was it the ability to work together, huddled close in the Longhouse, that made them so successful in enduring the winter? Or was it their individual toughness that enabled them to face such challenges? Some believe that communal living was essential, allowing the Vikings to pool resources, share warmth and support one another in ways that individual strength alone couldn't achieve. Others suggest that the Vikings' survival came down to their mental and physical endurance, their ability to withstand whatever the environment threw at them. Perhaps it was a combination of both strength, resilience, and unity. The warmth of the fire flickers and dims slightly, but for now the cold outside remains just beyond reach. The Longhouse offers more than physical shelter. It offers the sense of being part of something larger than yourself. As the fire continues to burn, you realize that it is more than just a source of warmth. It is a symbol of survival of life continuing in the face of a world that constantly threatens to freeze you out. The shared fire, the communal space, and the collective effort to endure have been the heart of Viking life for generations. You think back on the food shared around this fire, how it sustained you through the long winter. The preserved meats, salted fish, and dried vegetables are simple but vital to survival. The Vikings didn't just endure, they made use of everything they had, stretching every resource to its limit. Their food preservation techniques passed down through generations allowed them to make it through the long months when fresh supplies were scarce. Scholars still debate the role of diet in Viking survival. Some argue that their reliance on salted meat and preserved fish gave them the protein they needed to stay strong, while others suggest that their diet lacked important nutrients, particularly fresh vegetables and fruits. However, it's clear that their ability to preserve food for the winter months was critical to ensuring they had enough to survive. The Longhouse, with its central hearth and communal design, was a direct response to the environment the Vikings lived in. The structure itself was simple yet ingenious, built to withstand the cold, sheltering the people who called it home. The roof was slanted to shed snow, the walls thick enough to trap heat, and the space inside designed for social interaction as much as for survival. The Longhouse wasn't just a shelter from the storm, it was a symbol of how the Vikings adapted to the world around them. They didn't just fight the cold, they learned how to live alongside it, making use of everything their environment offered. As the night stretches on, the fire continues to burn, albeit more quietly. The wind outside, though fierce, is a reminder that tomorrow will bring another day of challenges. Yet inside you find peace in the shared warmth, in the knowledge that the community will face the cold together. The cold may never truly go away, but the fire and the collective effort to keep it alive will always be there, a source of warmth and strength in the Longhouse. The night seems to stretch on endlessly as the fire continues to burn low, its soft glow providing a sense of peace amidst the deepening cold. Outside, the wind howls and the snow piles up, but within the Longhouse, there is warmth, comfort from the fire, and from the presence of others. The cold may press against the walls, but inside there is the unspoken understanding that together the Vikings will endure. Each person plays a part in this collective effort, whether it's gathering firewood, preparing the evening meal, or simply offering quiet companionship by the hearth. You look around at the familiar faces, noticing the subtle shifts in the atmosphere as the night wears on. The warmth of the fire may fade, but the spirit of the community does not. The Longhouse itself seems to pulse with life, its wooden beams and thatched roof holding the gathered warmth as best as they can. The cold is a reminder of the world outside, but inside the Longhouse, survival is about more than just enduring. It is about thriving in spite of the hardships, about finding meaning and connection even in the face of adversity. Historians continue to explore whether the Viking way of life was shaped more by their environment or by their social structure. Some argue that their resilience was largely due to their adaptation to the brutal conditions with every element of their society, from their clothing to their homes designed for survival. Others suggest that it was their social cohesion, the strength of their community, and the bonds formed inside these very longhouses that truly allowed them to survive. Was the cold the force that shaped Viking society, or was it the Vikings' ability to support one another that allowed them to endure the cold? One thing is clear, the Longhouse was not merely a shelter. It was a space that encouraged cooperation, a place where people gathered not only to escape the cold but also to share their lives. The fire that burned at the centre was more than just warmth. It was a focal point for community, a symbol of shared effort and a space for the exchange of stories, ideas and experiences. It wasn't just about staying warm, it was about staying connected, about ensuring that no one faced the harshness of winter alone. Food too was a central part of this communal life. The preserved meats, dried fish and root vegetables that were staples of Viking diet were not just sustenance. They were a product of careful preparation and community effort. These foods were carefully stored, ensuring that the Vikings had enough to get through the long winter months. Scholars still discuss the impact of the Viking diet on their survival. Was their reliance on preserved food and salted meats enough to keep them healthy, or did they lack the variety needed for a well-rounded diet? Some argue that while the diet may have been sufficient for short-term survival, it may have lacked important nutrients, while others suggest that it was well suited to the environment and helped maintain their strength through the winter. Regardless of the specifics, the Vikings' abilities to preserve food for the long winter months was crucial to their survival. As the fire dies down, the warmth seems to fade with it, but the sense of community lingers. You reflect on the collective effort it takes to survive in such a harsh environment, the work, the sacrifices, and the shared moments of rest. The cold will always return, pressing at the edges of your awareness, but tonight you find comfort in the knowledge that within these walls the cold is manageable. Tomorrow the cycle will begin again, The fire will be rekindled, the food will be prepared, and the warmth will return. For now you rest knowing that the community you share these moments with will face whatever comes together. The night has settled into its quiet rhythm, the fire now reduced to a soft glow casting faint shadows around the longhouse. The wind outside remains unrelenting, howling and rattling the walls, but inside the steady warmth from the hearth offers a sense of peace. The fire's crackling, though quieter now, still fills the space with a comforting presence. You wrap yourself in the warmth, knowing that the cold will always return, but for tonight the fight against it has been won. The longhouse, with its thick walls and slanted roof, has stood the test of time. The structure has weathered countless winters, and yet it still stands firm, offering protection from the harsh elements outside. But the longhouse is more than just a building. It is a symbol of Viking life, of how a community could come together to face the most unforgiving of environments. The cold may press against the walls, but the shared effort of the people within these walls is what truly keeps the winter at bay. As you sit by the fire, you reflect on how much of Viking survival was about more than just physical endurance. The cold could be fought with fire warmth.